Greetings everyone and welcome back to bannersonthewall.wordpress.com. Anthony Russell here and welcome to our Banners on the Road series. Banners on the Road is my weird and wonderful winding journey through British hockey. If I go to a game, you get the in-depth bit of analysis, a really deep dive into that game that I've looked at, and you join us for this particular one from the set of the BOTW What's Current stream, the NIHL's first, best and only live show that covers all 5 NIHL divisions. You can join us usually on a Wednesday night, but of course this Wednesday is Christmas Day. This is Christmas Eve as I'm chatting to you now. The next BOTW What's Current stream is this Friday, 27th of December, 8 PM. But before we talk about all the other NIHL bits and pieces, we need to talk about last weekend, and one game in particular. That's what we're here for. Banners on the Road, one game in depth, and this one comes from last Saturday, the 21st of December, from the Slough Ice Arena. The Berkshire Bees versus the Peterborough Phantoms. The final score: Berkshire Bees 5, Peterborough Phantoms 3. Goals in this one: 2 for Don Dubai. One of those was short-handed, as well as goals from Will Stead, Adam Rossbottom and Marcel Balach. The goals for the Peterborough Phantoms in this game coming from Austin Mitchell-King, 1 on the power play from Cam Huff, and 1 from Jasper Forster. The thing about going to games in Slough always comes with a bit of an extra thing for me, mostly because usually, if I'm heading to a Bees game at least, I will get to travel with the fantastic Joe Scutts. Now, if you don't know who Joe Scutts is, Joe runs NIHLstats.wordpress.com, which has been a fantastic resource for a good couple of years, and he's also the main commentator for the Bees stream. Joe also happens to live the other side of Southampton city centre to me, so usually if we're going to the same place, Joe hops in the car, and what it means is that I get to chat about hockey with somebody else. Joe and I can, talk about life, talk about everything, as we've known each other now for the better part of a decade, and we can just, talk about all those bits and pieces that mates do. I normally travel to a lot of my hockey by myself, and I meet people there, so the opportunity to have someone in the car to do that, beautiful, love it to pieces. When I was there, of course, Joe was commentating alongside the fantastic Chris Beale, and I was just there to watch the game. And usually, like I said, I just kind of stand by myself, walk around, find people. But this time, I was joined by another one of I say British hockey, kind of hockey blogging fraternity, as it were. Got the opportunity to spend the game chatting to Christian from the Rinkside Review. Now, if you're not familiar with the Rinkside Review, Christian is based in Czechia, and he does English language content about Czech and Slovak hockey. Has done some really good, interesting deep dives for people about some Czech and Slovak guys playing in British leagues, and imports as well that have come over to the Elite League that have played over there. Definitely do go check out Christian's stuff. Really, really grateful to spend some time with him. If nothing else, only because he doesn't watch a lot of British hockey with his own eyes. He's based in Europe and is back visiting family. So it was great to watch the game with somebody who knew a bit about some of the players, knew a bit about their backgrounds, but hadn't necessarily seen them. So I got to get a really, really extra good bit of perspective as a result on whilst we were chatting about this one. The game itself started off, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen in this one. With all due respect to Peterborough, you do kind of know what you're going to get with Peterborough, or at least what they're going to try and do. Slava Kulikov's brand of hockey works for Slava, and it hasn't changed much in the main. The characters have always rotated around, but the story has never differed, and you know what Peterborough are going to try and do. They're going to sit back, try and absorb pressure, break quickly, and exploit the mistakes, whereas the Bees have had a pretty torrid year. Bottom of the National Division, only 13 points so far as we head towards we were heading towards Christmas. They'd gone up to Solway the previous weekend for a double header, had only travelled with 1 goalie, 4 defencemen and 7 forwards. But this time they had a few more bodies back. A couple of guys were back from injury, including Marcus Mitchell, who was back on the fence, and 2 new signings. Jacob Branson had joined in the week from the Romford Raiders, and Josh Martin was back on the ice after a 27-game suspension for the game misconduct he picked up during the NIHL Division 1 National Final in Coventry, where he was thrown out for throwing an elbow into the head of a junior. Either way, it meant the Bees were a much more different prospect. At home, albeit their ice is a pretty similar size to Solway's when all things are considered. But what it meant was that what sort of Bees were we going to get? The game was pretty end-to-end to start with. Chances were kind of at both ends. Neither goalkeepers being kind of immediately hugely tested, but it did mean we did get to see kind of the Bees attacking with some intent, and then out of nowhere, Peterborough were a goal up. And it was classic Peterborough. Absorbed pressure coming from the Bees, who were doing really well on the forecheck, and then out of nowhere, Peterborough break, up the ice, nice and quick. Austin Mitchell-King snipes it past Mac's right top corner. And I take that sort of exhale of breath of, here we go again. And the lead lasted all of about a minute and a half. Teddy bears eventually do come flying. My problem was, and if you've never been to Slough, there is netting completely around the top of the ends. I'm standing at the end behind one of the goals. It's just the best place I find to watch in Slough. The sight lines aren't great down the side, so I will stand behind the goal at the cafe end in Slough. And I suddenly realised that I had this bear I needed to throw on the ice, and I had to sprint around the edge of the boards to the nearest bit of stand that I could find where there was no netting in the way to lob this teddy bear onto the ice. But the bees were on level terms, mostly according to my notes. As it says here, goodbye from Wilstead from Mogg, and ultimately it's a really, really nice Dom goodbye goal. Just battles his way, breaks his way through the defence, loses his balance, is knocked to the ice, and still manages to find a way to backhand the puck through Hayden Levine to do the business. And so the game is tied at 1 just before the 6 minute mark, and from there it's more bees. The bees were kind of having the better of this game, and I know people, it's easy to kind of say that in hindsight, given the fact that we're all talking about this after the fact. We know the bees won. But like I say, a team that had kind of been short on body, short on energy, and also missing a very, energetic guy like Liam Morris, who's picked up this really lengthy suspension. Where were the ideas? Where was everything going to come from? But the bees just kind of kept the wheels in motion. Peterborough didn't change what they were doing. They were sitting back. We knew they were going to sit back. And just like I say, just skimming back through the notes and stuff that I've gone here, we can see, there's a few I mention in bits and pieces about the fact that the Phantoms obviously weren't having no shots at all. Just Max Wright was mostly kind of equal to them, and then ultimately the bees get the lead as they kind of deserve to. Stead from goodbye from Antonov at 16-19 is the second goal. Not great in their own end from the Phantoms. Goodbye does a great bit of work to kind of inset the pass and just lays it off for Stead to fire past Levine. Really, really poor positioning. The Phantoms have kind of boxed out so far that when Goodbye's made the intercept, there's nobody close enough to Will Stead to kind of do anything about it. Instead, who's a guy in form and scored lots of goals recently and full of confidence, is going to score those all day. And then it's 2-2 by the end of the first period. And again, there's that exhale of breath. Here we go again. And it was a penalty. Josh Kelly has kind of like slowed Ferrara down to kind of make sure that he doesn't go past it. So it's kind of necessary penalties. And the Phantoms just work it around. And Cam Huff has been, arguably he's been one of the finds of the season so far. And the fact that he scored on the power play, 1932, Huff from Lacken and from Buglas. The shot comes in and he's just there on the rebound to tap it in. 2-2. Those things happen. But first period ends and ultimately the Bees kind of deserve to be ahead in this game. And they really kind of just pressed on from that point. It's not that the Phantoms didn't have chances, of course. They were forcing saves out of right, but it never felt like the Phantoms really sort of properly clicked in this game. I'm just skipping forward in my notes to try and find the next goal. So the second period obviously starts. The third goal for the Bees eventually comes 29-12 on the power play from Adam Rossbottom, and it's standard power play kind of fair, just worked around and Rossbottom fires it in. You can see it on the highlights, but the thing is, by that point, the Phantoms are not. They're not out of the game by any stretch of the imagination, but it just feels like the way to always counter this Peterborough style of play, I always find, is that you can push them and they will absorb that pressure. But if you push really, really hard, if you push them really onto the back foot where they're starting to panic a little bit as they're working, that's where they really, really struggle. It's a different kind of thing to be forced backwards as to kind of say, come on and break us down. It's something we've heard from Alex Murray in Solent with the Solent Devils quite a lot. It's your job to break us down if you want to score. And it's kind of similar-ish to how Peterborough play, albeit it's a very, very different kettle of fish trying to do that in Gosport with much less space. But the Bees just kept finding a way. And Rossbottom's goal puts the Bees 3-2 up. And at that point, I was kind of thinking to myself, If the Bees score the next one, they're going to press on. They're going to press on, and they're going to win, and they do. So there's less than 2 minutes between the goals. Delayed penalty comes to the Phantoms. Wright sprints to the bench, and actually, kind of in the way that the Bees had been stung, pardon the pun, by the Phantoms' first goal, is what they do for their fourth. They kind of just take the opportunity with the extra man, sprint up the ice, move the puck around nicely, and Goodbye, again, because this is what Dom Goodbye likes to do, just teeing it up for everybody else, and Marcel Balach smashes it home to make it 4-2. Now, you hit the end of the second period, and there's no discussion really. The Bees deserve to be ahead. I think, what did I write at the time on Twitter, just looking at this? Writers look the better at the goalies, and the Phantoms just can't get going, trying to come forward as they're mobbed by 3 Bees who are back checking for their lives. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in a bit. In terms of the third period, the Bees have to fight off a 5-on-3. 2 penalties really that, I mean, they'll argue the toss about it in a moment. Ransom was called for a hook. Mogg was called for a hook, and they both were hooks, I think, if we're 100% honest. And then just as the Bees get one skater back, comes the 5th goal, and this kind of really actually pushed the Bees beyond the reach of the Phantoms in this one. It's a Goodbye short-handed goal where he just manages to force the turnover. The Phantoms try to play the puck up the wall. There's too many Bees there. Goodbye is off and away to the races and beats Levine, who's already having a pretty tough night, all things considered. Now the Phantoms do get a goal back pretty much about 90 seconds later. Foster from Kynaston, and actually, again, Kynaston definitely deserved some sort of recognition on the night. I thought it was a really good night for him, and it's one of those sort of archetypical Jasper Foster kind of shots where he will just kind of get that modicum of space, and he's got a really, really good release. He's not the biggest, most physically imposing kind of guy, and he doesn't like have massive arms or a massive stick, but he's got a really, really good release on his shot, and he was able to beat Wright as a result. There is a superb save from Max Wright in the death, which if you look at the tweet the Bees put out advertising their highlights, is in that. It's a pretty mad save down low to his left by Wright to just catch the puck in his glove and not lose it. But ultimately, the Phantoms just don't really have much of an answer and take a really, really late penalty as well. I thought Callum Buglas had been called. They stuck Jasper Foster in the box, but I'm pretty certain it was Buglas who actually tripped the man. And that kind of killed any opportunity off for the Phantoms, taking a penalty with about 2.5 minutes left. But yeah, the Bees were the better side for 60 minutes. That's why they won. Now, whether necessarily how happy Dom Goodbye and Ashley Tate will be with this performance, I'm not 100% sure. The Bees definitely have deficiencies in their game, and I don't just mean the fact they don't necessarily always have enough players. They kind of, you can see where they're switching on and switching off in terms of just being really, really focused on ice in terms of what they're doing. And they can't do that. They came up against a side that's been indifferent in its form and had a bad night in their barn. All the advantages were with the Bees. Last change, knowing how everything goes. Crowd behind them, just under 500 for this one. I think 482 was what was listed. But certainly all of the things were there for the Bees to win this game because they had all of the advantages kind of on their side. But this doesn't take away from the fact this was probably one of their better performances of the year. The thing that the Bees have to do is work hard for 60 minutes. They don't have the depth of bench, and they don't necessarily have the talent amount below their top lines to really, really make dents. They don't have the bench of a Leeds or a Milton Keynes or a Swindon. So if you don't have that really, really high element of skill, you've got to do it by hard work. And I always kind of remember what Michael Wales said to me, one of the really, really early interviews and banners on the wall in its really, really early years, of the reason why I've gotten so far is not because I can do toe drag backhands through my legs, it's because I will work harder than anybody else you find. And to the Bees' credit, they outworked Peterborough in this game. From a man of the match perspective, Max Wright made some really, really good saves. I mean, just double checking from my notes in terms of the man of the match. So Dom Goodbye got man of the match for the Bees and Cam Huff for the Phantoms. For Goodbye, I totally understand. Coach kind of led from the front in this game, scored 2 very, very pretty goals, set up pretty much everything else into the bargain as well. you know, a 5-point night when when the team scores 5 goals, it's pretty understandable. But it was a really, really good all-round team performance. Josh Martin came in, he wasn't used beyond his sort of skill set, which I thought was really, really smart for him. They set him out to crash and bang and forecheck. It's what Josh Martin's really good at. He'll throw a hit, and if he misses, he won't care. He'll stand back up and he'll go again. Jacob Ranson, like I said, used on D. His added element of flexibility, where you think now the Bees have both got Morris and Ranson, both who can play up front in a really, really high intensity forechecking role, but can also play on the back end. One is testament to both of their skating abilities, and two is just that element of flexibility that all teams really, really need. Maybe neither of those two guys, particularly as well with Morris out, and neither of those two boys are scoring 40 points a season, but they are going to be able to do a bunch of things that guys really, really need to. And ultimately, everything just worked on the night for the Bees. For the Phantoms, it was a bit of I can understand why people would be, if you're a Phantoms fan, you're frustrated why you'll have felt, I travelled all this way. And yeah, the Phantoms didn't really they got kind of stuck in second or third gear and never really got going. Ferrara was quiet, Lackinen was quiet, Huff scored but was ultimately quiet. The top 6 just didn't really feel like it ever massively got into the game. They got swamped as soon as they got the puck. They tried things, and it wasn't to say they didn't try. This wasn't a performance where the Phantoms were just like, well, we can't be bothered to be here. Some nights it just doesn't work for you. What didn't help as well was, I thought it was also a bad night for Hayden Levine. He struggled to catch things in his glove. His positioning is actually really good. I find that he's actually really good at kind of getting square to shots. But on this night, everything was bouncing off him like he was made of trampoline material, the poor guy. And you have to feel for goalies in that sense. When you're fighting the puck, where you don't become a netminder, you become a shot stopper. But you don't know where the shot's going once it's come off of you. And, you know, Levine's not a bad netminder. His pedigree speaks very clearly to that fact, that this guy is not a bad goalie at all. He's a good goalie who had a bad night. But I think one thing, the Phantoms just seem to lack, and I mean, it's a criticism you can have of their style. They're not the most creative of sides at times, per se, particularly on the road where they do play where they play road hockey. Sit back, break, exploit the angles. But actually, especially when it kind of got to 4-2 and 5-2, they could have really used some of that creativity that we know Lackinen has, that we know Ferrara has, that we know Salem has, that we know Huff has, that we know Mitchell King has. They could have really done with that, but they were so in the hole so late that it's really hard to kind of twist, turn the ship really quickly at that point. That could be quite hard. What I think from it, obviously the two teams were meant to meet the next night in Peterborough. The ice wasn't suitable, and that game has been postponed, which I think is actually is really bad for both of these teams. The Bees would have really, really done with the extra momentum, and they could have done with just getting another game under their belt, push on. Maybe they wouldn't have won in Peterborough. It's a hard place to win. Teams don't do well there. But going and throwing in another 60 minutes of that kind of performance would have been really, really big. Maybe, get 3 points out of the weekend would have been huge in the context of trying to make a late surge for those playoff spots. And for Peterborough, they just need to get back on the horse, because this wasn't a really good night. And said I'd mention him, I thought this is probably... I've seen Louis Kinniston in and out of games now for the last little while. I thought this was the best game I've ever seen him play. I thought he did really, really well. Where the top guys weren't quite firing on all cylinders, Slava Kulikov gave him extra time alongside like Jasper Foster and stuff. And I thought Louis looked really, really good. And it's good to have another young British centre coming through. I know Peterborough have tried to find sort of a face-off replacement for Will Weldon since his retirement, but ultimately you need guys who can kind of play up the middle. Connor Lee is obviously coming through in Manchester, and having another young British centre there is really good. Brindley Capps at Coventry can play wing or centre. I know he's been used in both positions this year, but Kinniston is at the age now where hopefully he can kind of push on and get really good really quick. I think he'll be a massive boon to Peterborough if they're able to get really, really shore up that centre depth with a good young British centre that they haven't had to bring in from elsewhere. So I thought he did really, really well. From a Bees, like I say, who else can I kind of pick out from a Bees perspective? He's just thinking to himself. I think actually you just have to kind of credit the defence on this one. It's a defence that's let in a lot of goals this year. And yeah, they let in 3 in this one, but 3's pretty good, all things considered, against a team that's no slouches. And we know, because you can never count out Peterborough, will be tough coming to the back end of the season. Either way, we move on. Next game in the Banners on the Road series, I go back into the box on the 28th of December. I'll be commentating on Guildford versus Coventry, so we get another episode of In the Box Thinking, and we will see what that one offers up. But after the new year, much more, a little bit of Elite League, and then back full whack into the NIHL, including, hopefully as well, a couple of bits of commentary here and there too. So I'll definitely be back in Slough before the end of the season. Either way, the Bees take this one, and deservedly so, it should be said. Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, facebook.com/bannersonthewall, at bannersotw on X, search Banners on the Wall on Blue Sky. The virtual busking hat is at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. And ultimately, the biggest and most important message I can give everybody at the moment is Merry Christmas. Have a really good one. Like I said, this is coming out on the evening of Christmas Eve. Have a great Christmas, everybody. And make sure to join us on Friday, the 27th of December, 8 PM over on the BOTW YouTube channel for the BOTW What's Coming stream. Be happy, and if you can't be happy, especially this time of year, please do be safe. For Banners on the Wall, the WordPress. Sorry, got that right. How did I get my own outro wrong? Be happy. If you can't be happy, please be safe. As my friend Scotty Walls would say, take care of yourself and somebody else. For Banners on the Wall.wordpress.com, this is Anthony Russell saying stay safe. So long until next time. Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.